Welcome to the Soulful Surgeon Podcast with Dr. Lisa Hunsicker, a sanctuary for healthcare workers. In this space, we honor your stories, your struggles, and your triumphs. Here, you are more than your role. You are seen, heard, and celebrated. Join me as we explore conversations that nourish the heart, elevate the mind, and remind us why we chose the path of healing. This is your time. This is your place. This is the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lisa Hunsicker. This is the place where healthcare workers come to be seen and heard, and this is where we talk about being human beings in healthcare. Now, today I have a very, very special guest. One of my favorite people, Julia Osborne, is here. She is a physical therapist who has been working in healthcare for over 30 years. She is also the founder that you started, in 2009 for Oncology Rehab. Yes. And this is near and dear to my heart because, as you all know, I am a plastic surgeon who does breast reconstruction. And so Julia has taken care of our patients for a long time. And you've seen over 100,000 visits. And now, gosh, you've even expanded even into Florida and Tennessee, as well as Texas. So welcome to the podcast, Julia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
We're going to have such a great time today. I'm so excited. This is our first podcast going out that's not, obviously, I've done the two introductions, but now we're really going to get to it. And Julia, so your accent is not quite from the U.S.
No, it is not. I am originally from South Africa.
So now you're in South Africa. You're thinking about being a physical therapist. What turned you on to physical therapy?
Well, it actually started many, many, many years ago. When I was a little girl, there used to be a television program called Rescue 911 with William Shatner. And I used to silence the family on a Tuesday evening at 6:30 when this would show. And I just absolutely loved Rescue 911. And I watched it week after week after week, year after year after year, to be honest. And in that, I saw physical therapists working with patients, and I thought, that's exactly what I want to do. And that started when I was about 11 years old, and I kept the dream alive. And here I am today, a physical therapist.
So this is all taking place in South Africa.
Yes.
But you've jumped across the ocean and you've joined us here in the United States. What is it that brought you over to the U.S.?
Good question. So I qualified as a physical therapist in South Africa, graduated almost 30 years ago and a few years beyond that. And I lived and worked in South Africa for a few years as a physical therapist, and then really just decided I wanted to spread my wings. And so the first country I went to was actually United Kingdom, to England. And I worked as a physical therapist there for a couple of years. And then I thought, I wonder what the United States is like. And part of my reason for wondering that was because England, as you know, has a lot of rain. And I felt like I had sort of developed, duck feet by this time. And so I began to long for some sunshine and just wondered with my travel lust what the United States would be like. And I had an aunt who lived in Sacramento. So over to the United States, I came and landed in California and went to Sacramento, met up with my aunt, and then discovered that in order to work in the United States, one has to, take exams and become certified for the United States and so on. So I set forth and did all of that and got it all taken care of. And I thought that I'd be in the United States for a year or two. And here I am, almost 28 years later.
So that's a long trip to get over here. So what drew you? So now you've transitioned. You've gone through countries, you're in a new country. Now what made you decide, I want to start my own business? And what drew you to oncology?
Well, I was practicing in an outpatient physical therapy practice here in Denver. And I was treating everything from hips, knees, shoulders, elbows, etc. I was doing essentially orthopedic related physical therapy. And one day a woman walked in and she sat down in front of me and she said, I've had breast cancer and I can't move my shoulder. Can you help me? And in that moment, I had this kind of vision that went across my mind of, how am I going to do this? And oh my goodness, I have not actually been educated with how to treat and manage oncology patients. And of course, in that moment, I sort of said to her, oh my goodness, I'm not sure how to manage your oncology diagnosis, but I can certainly help you with your shoulder. And so I did, but I realized that the two really interlinked very, very strongly. So I went home that evening and began to read up what I could find about oncology rehabilitation. And, this is now 20 odd years ago. There wasn't a whole lot of information. And so I began to think about this and I realized myself, I had not been taught anything about oncology rehabilitation at the university level. Therefore, it was not something that was really in my career. But I also realized by the lack of research and resources for physical therapists that it probably globally wasn't really in university curriculums and wasn't really a piece of our practice. And indeed, as I researched it and read up about it, that is in fact what I ascertained. And so I decided that, some change needed to be brought about. And I began to make it my mission to really study oncology rehabilitation. Part of it was study, part of it was design, and work out how to treat these patients and deliver, the best care possible to them. So in the case of this patient, treating her shoulder, but also looking at the whole oncological element that was happening with her concurrent to what was happening to her shoulder.
I feel like you were developing this field as you were going because it was such a new territory and there wasn't a lot of information out there. You're creating and you're designing this whole protocol that now is extending into multi-states. You're a pioneer in this.
Well, yes, thank you, Lisa. I feel incredibly passionate about oncology rehabilitation and about oncology patients. And really it is born out of this passion that I have worked so hard over the last 20 plus years to, in fact, yes, design treatment protocols, design a methodology that other therapists can use to treat patients not only here in Colorado, but treat patients throughout the United States and actually globally as well. So I've worked very hard. We've had a number of practices here in Colorado where I've trained all the therapists who've been part of these practices in my methodology and in the protocols that I essentially created. Certainly, I've had help from colleagues along the way, and it's been a very collaborative process, which has been fantastic and phenomenal. But yes, this is what we have established here in the United States and globally. And it is absolutely, wonderful to see it being delivered to patients. And really what really warms my heart is when I get the messages back about how the patients are doing and how they are recovering and how they're getting back to life and how they're finding new elements of their lives that they love to do that at one point in time they maybe thought would be very difficult or maybe even, be negated for them. But that, in fact, is not the case. And so that's really where I have, centered my study for the last 23 years.
Well, and so in listening to you talk, one of the things that I take away from this is how expansive and innovative that you are, but also how very detailed you are. And you have so much commitment to your patients. Now, recently, you had your own personal health scare. And so, what's it like going from this business owner, practitioner, and then having to become, not choosing, of course, but becoming a patient yourself? Tell us a little bit about that. How did that come about?
It sort of came out of the blue, to be honest, but that's what diseases do, or illnesses. I was, going along, doing my work, very focused on it, as I always have been. And suddenly I began to develop swelling in both my legs that actually then proceeded to occur throughout my body. And at the same time, I developed severe shortness of breath. And I realized that I was in trouble. But I think one of the biggest lessons for me in this whole thing happened right at the very beginning of all of this. And that is that in spite of the fact that I was having these issues, I was so involved in my work and so determined and tenacious, as well as caring about what I was doing, that I kept putting my own ailment aside. And I went and had dinner with some friends on a Sunday evening. And in the middle of dinner, I decided to share with them that I was having these issues. And they both immediately expressed, grave concern and encouraged me to go to the emergency room, which I did the next day after I cleaned the house, et cetera, et cetera.
Stop you there. So and for everyone there, that person was me. And so this is why this is the impetus for the Soulful Surgeon. So this is really very heartfelt for me because there's someone very much that I care about who we're having dinner and we've gone through this entire dinner and you were talking because you're getting ready to leave to go to South Africa. And you mentioned this of like, hey, I'm going to be getting on a plane on Friday to fly to South Africa when I've got these issues. What do you think about it? And of course, we were very, very concerned. But so here's the thing. You understood that there was still, that you needed to be seen right away, but you went home and you cleaned the house and it took you till the next morning. What prompted you to do that versus going straight to what's your mindset at that point?
Very good question. My mindset at that point was, this can't be happening to me. This just can't be. I have been the caregiver for 30 years. I have, looked after so many people and seen them through, such intense times in their lives. Obviously, people being diagnosed with cancer, it is very, very intense. And before that, I was treating all sorts of injuries. And so I always viewed myself as the caregiver, the provider of care. And I never had seen myself as needing care myself, other than, yes, the odd physician appointment that we all go to. But I just never viewed myself as somebody who might also need the same level of care. And so I was immensely grateful, back to you. I was immensely grateful because without really being stopped by you and Krista, I think I would have got on that airplane on Friday and I would have flown to South Africa. And to be honest, I might not be here today with that. So what transpired was the next day after I cleaned the house, I went to the emergency room and said that I had some issues with my heart, which I finally admitted to myself, and immediately got ushered through into their sort of cardiac area. And indeed, it was very serious, and they actually hospitalized me for a week. And so I canceled the trip to South Africa and stayed, and I was safely in hospital. They had to run a number of tests, and what it turned out to be was I had severe hypertrophy of my heart, and left ventricular PVCs, which essentially resulted in me having significant heart failure. And it put me in a very serious situation. I was sent home, but I was told that I was not allowed to do any exercise. I wasn't even allowed to walk up the stairs of the home. I had to stay all on the ground level, which I did. And then I had to have, a heart surgery, which I had at the end of September. And that too was tricky. As it turns out, the surgeon was actually quite concerned after the surgery and said that I very likely would need another surgery. But I'm thankful to say that I have the grace of some time before I do the next surgery. So I'm still not 100%, but I am so much better. But it certainly has brought about a lot of thinking on my part.
How did you feel, because you're the super busy practitioner plus a businesswoman as well, running this practice? Could you work?
No.
And how'd that feel? How did that feel because I know for me, when dealing with some of my issues, it was like, I got to get back to work. I've got to get back to work. I've got to get to my patients. But at some point, you're being stopped and your body is not going to keep up with you. So what did you do in that time?
I struggled, to be honest. I struggled a lot with what I felt that I wanted to do, what I felt that I should be doing, what I felt that I had always been doing, particularly for the last, 20 odd years. And it was very difficult to put the brakes on and literally stop myself. In fact, one of the things that I did was I gave my brother my computer and said, you have to take this away from me because otherwise I'm going to work. So he did. There were times when I was a little more stable prior to the surgery where, with how my lifestyle was, I stabilized somewhat and I was able to do some work. And so part of the work that I do is I educate other clinicians on how to treat oncology patients. And so I was able to revamp some of those courses and those classes and think about my teaching and what I was going to do. But essentially I really was not supposed to do anything. It was a very difficult time in my life, but it did give me time to think about the future, to think about my career, to think about how I was going to transition my career into the hands of maybe some other people that might be able to assist and keep the work, the dream alive. And that became very, very important. Before this, I was like, well, I can do all of this and I'm going to do all of this. And suddenly I found myself thinking about who could join me so that I could, share the load and still get the message out there into the world. And so that is what I've spent a lot of time doing. I do still teach. I am now, since my surgery, I'm back teaching. I'm really back to living my life, but I just don't have the same capacity that I used to have. So yes, some changes there.
What other things? So you've modified your schedule, obviously, and you're continuing to teach. But what other things, what are you doing for you also?
Well, that is a good question for me. Some of it initially was fairly limited because I was not allowed to do very much. It's amazing when your heart won't work or it doesn't work very well, you actually can't do much. Anyway, since the surgery, I've been able to basically start exercising again. So for me, what's really important is activities. And so I do love to walk. So I walk every single day. I hope to get back to skiing. I love skiing as well. So next season, I'll be waving to everybody on the ski slopes. I love to play tennis. I love to ride my bike. Some of those things, not quite yet, but they're on my radar and I'm going to do them. I think one of the biggest things for me, Lisa, is really thinking about, my life. So there's two parts. One is my professional life and how to keep that alive, which is what we're doing. And so we're recruiting additional people to help. I should also say that, in terms of my teaching, we're leveraging the teaching into an operational model as well, because what we've discovered is that you can teach therapists how to do oncology rehabilitation, but if you don't have the operational support, it's very difficult programmatically to make the programs work. And so a large part of the work that I've been doing over the last few months is looking at the operational components with my partners. And we have two levels that we're adding in. One is an operational component within a physical therapy practice. And the second is the operational component of rehab therapists in a cancer service line. So a lot of work being done around that. So that does keep me busy. But the other thing was really, what do I want in life? And I really encourage people to think about that. I think so often we get caught up in our careers and we compromise in some way, sometimes out of necessity, but sometimes we have to evaluate that necessity. And I think that's important. And so my encouragement to everybody is to try to balance life as well as one possibly can, and to choose activities or to choose locations of life, to make choices that are inclusive of what one actually wants, as well as inclusive of what one can do professionally as well. It's a very difficult thing to do. And many, many people speak about it all the time. But, I feel that I'm sort of living proof of what can happen if one doesn't think about oneself and pause oneself into one's profession, which is what a lot of us want to do. I think it's really important that we pull back just a little every now and then and say, wait a minute, what is it that I need, or what is it that my family needs? What do we need? And try to work out incrementally sometimes how to bring that balance in. It doesn't have to be big. It can be small things like taking a walk, like starting a day half an hour later or ending half an hour earlier to go for a swim or something like that. Really simple things. Of course, I've done the simple things, but I also, I'm definitely a person that likes a lot of excitement in life. And another piece of what I've done is I have purchased a house back in my homeland, South Africa, and I am working out how to live both in the United States and in South Africa. And what South Africa holds, hopefully, is a continuation of career there as well, but maybe some other things too. And I'm open to whatever those may be.
So let's say you and I are sitting down and it's 10 years from now. And where are we sitting? Where are we, in South Africa? Are we in the US? 10 years from now.
10 years from now, let's say we're sitting in South Africa.
Okay. And then tell me what your day is like. What do you see for your future? What's your mindset? What do you want to be doing?
My mindset would be, so one of the things that South Africa offers, which is really what I'm going for, is we have a lot of natural wildlife. And I have really felt the need to reinvite that back into my life. So we're going to say that we're sitting in South Africa and we're looking out over the African plains where we can see giraffe and zebra, and, beautiful game like that. What I envisage is an ability to enjoy that fully, but also an ability to use my skill set in South Africa to help with whatever needs to be done there. Now, the evolution of this, I can't exactly articulate, but South Africa is a country that has a very advanced medical system, surprisingly so. And so they're very, on the money with everything. They know exactly what to do and how to do it. But there is also a very, very high poverty rate in South Africa, which has always been there. and something that we constantly try to address. And I would like to do my part in that as well. And so it may be that there could be some remote areas or some not so remote areas that are in need of cancer care. And I would like to go in and work out how to deliver that, either by teaching therapists who are there and who are in some of these local areas, or, actually implementing some work myself. I don't know what it's going to look like. So the picture of the day is going to be to enjoy some of the beauty that surrounds us in South Africa, and also going into some of the areas where help is greatly needed and where help is severely lacking. I would like to make a poignant difference in the latter years of my life, my working life. I'm not done yet.
That's incredible, because I feel like as we age and as we perhaps maybe step out of direct patient care, that means we're retired and that we leave that. But I feel like you're describing a wonderful example for all of us to continue on. It may not look exactly like what we're doing right now. And I think that we can pass this on, right? Because if we keep it to ourselves, then we don't get to share. And future generations are missing out on that. So I feel like we can grow our specialties and grow the patient care, but then we can become a little bit less on front lines, perhaps, and take it to a very different level and expand in different ways. So I think that I really appreciate that approach, because I feel like some people feel the need that they have to work until literally they just die out of practice. And we had a plastic surgeon when I was just starting years ago, and he was a much older fella, and he finally retired. His wife was his nurse, and she had really been asking him, please, can we just cut back? I want to travel. We need to go out and experience some of this. And he waited a really, really long time, and he unfortunately stroked very shortly after he retired. And so that got pushed back. So I feel like, the things that we're talking about of going and enjoying things now and not waiting until then, but also understanding, and again, your situation, you don't know when that episode of whatever is going to occur. And much as we like to think about it, we're not immune. We're human beings. And so we can have heart attacks, we can have strokes, we can have all kinds of things that can happen to us, and we're not immune from that. And I do feel like we often go to work with that mindset of, I can operate with pneumonia. I can see patients with a broken leg. I mean, all of these things, because we're so driven to take care of people. But I think motivating us to take care of us, because I think we're going to do a better job taking care of patients if we are well taken care of as well. And I think that's something that with this podcast, I really want to talk about in many different facets. And so as we wrap this up, as we finish our podcast, there is a segment that I like to call, You Can't Make This Shit Up. And so this stuff happens to us, and there's all kinds of stuff. Sometimes it has to do with patient care. Sometimes it has to do with something that's going on in the office, something outside the office, something about running your business or whatever. So, you can't make this stuff up. What is it? What stuff would we not believe?
As I think about that, one of the odd joys that I had about going to work every day was a very odd joy, but I'll share the story. I worked in an office building with multiple different physician groups, as well as our rehab practice. And one of the physicians owned a Lamborghini, beautiful, beautiful vehicle. So every morning I would admire the Lamborghini and park my Nissan close by. And to my amazement, one morning, there was a goose sitting on top of none other than his Lamborghini. And this goose ended up sitting on top of his Lamborghini on the roof of his Lamborghini for months. Not only did it sit there for months, but it sat there with one leg up and the other one down, like that. And I just thought it was very funny, actually very cunning, very clever of this bird, because it knew the best car to sit on in the lot. It didn't sit on my Nissan. It didn't sit on somebody else's Chevrolet or, somebody's Ford. It sat on the Lamborghini every single day. And there it was, proudly on one leg, looking. And it just inspired me every day to just go for the very best, no matter how it looked, even though he chose the Lamborghini, no matter how it looked, just always go for the best and be the best, and to keep my head up and to sit up high. So that's, I guess, my little funny story. That you can't make this shit up. That's truly what happened.
So you had like a goose yoga on the Lamborghini.
Sure did. And it made me laugh every day. It was just wonderful. I'm assuming that the physician knew that the goose was on his Lamborghini, and I'm sure he had to clean it, frequently. But there it was, and it did its thing. So it was a little bit of inspiration for me and my colleagues. We would talk about it a lot. And it was, in a way, a little bit of a mascot of us, how we should be every day.
So as we close now, one sentence. You're talking to all the healthcare workers all across the world. One sentence. What do you want to tell folks?
Make sure that you enjoy every minute of taking care of your people, as well as taking care of yourself, because your life is incredibly valuable.
That's fantastic. So Julia, our listeners, if they want to reach out and get in contact with you, tell us what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way is to email me. So I'll give you my email. It's julia@oncologyrehab.net. That's probably the best way.
Your website is oncologyrehab.net.
Actually, the website is pori.org. So
how do you spell that?
So PORI is PORI and then .org, PORI. PORI stands for Physiological Oncology Rehabilitation Institute. It's our teaching institute.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, Julia, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. And again, everyone, this episode is so near and dear to my heart, because this really has what started me on the journey to bringing this podcast to you all. Seeing Julia's experience, and certainly, as you all have heard, my own experience about how we're always putting everyone else ahead of us. This is really what launched me into talking about this, so that we have a place to come and talk about exactly what's going on for us. So I hope this has served you well. Thank you so much. And we will see you on the next podcast. And as always, I am Dr. Lisa Hunsicker, your Soulful Surgeon. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on the Soulful Surgeon Podcast. I hope today's conversation offered you reflection, encouragement, and a reminder that you are not alone on this journey. If this episode spoke to your heart, please share it with someone who might need it as well. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of connecting with healthcare workers all over. You can find us on the web at soulfulsurgeon.com. You can find us on Instagram at Soulful Surgeon. And you can find us on LinkedIn at Lisa Hunsicker, MD. Until next time, take care of yourself the way you care for others. And remember, your story matters here.